Every inch of my body ached with unbearable intensity, as if each limb had been weighted down with leaden chains. My fingers, once nimble and dexterous, now felt as though they had been crushed under immense pressure. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The agony extended through my entire body. My legs throbbed with the same relentless pain that radiated from my chest and abdomen. I recalled reading somewhere that the human body is incapable of feeling pain in multiple areas simultaneously, but I'm here to vehemently dispute that claim. Whoever penned that absurd notion had no understanding of true suffering. As I let out a low, agonized groan, a mocking voice emerged from the oppressive darkness, cutting through the air like a knife. "Hey, moron, are you awake and prepared for another round?" The voice was accompanied by a cruel, derisive chuckle, nothing remotely resembling a genuine laugh, but rather the kind of sneering amusement that only deepens one's sense of despair. I lay motionless, gathering what remained of my scattered thoughts with painstaking effort. I began by recalling the most basic details of my identity. My name is Joe Thompson. Simple, yet profoundly significant. I am 35 years old, and my life revolves around my work as an accountant. Standing at 6 feet tall and weighing approximately 210 pounds, I make a concerted effort to maintain my fitness. I exercise rigorously 3 times a week and run a 5,000 twice a week as part of my regimen. Occasionally, I mix things up with mountain biking to break the monotony. My wife, Lisa Thompson, is 32 years old, and we have been married for 6 years. Though we do not have children, it's not due to a lack of desire on my part. The decision to delay parenthood rests solely with Lisa, who wishes to savor more of life's experiences before committing to the responsibilities of raising a family. Now, as I lie here, gasping for air amidst the choking dust, the reasons for my current predicament flood back into my mind with painful clarity. Over the past 6 to 8 weeks, our once harmonious home life had plummeted it into a nightmarish spiral of discord. This was not merely about the absence of warmth and intimacy in our bedroom, though that, too, was a significant blow. No, the turmoil was much more comprehensive and insidious. It was a relentless cascade of scornful remarks and disparaging comments that seemed to target every aspect of my being, my efforts, my failures, my physical appearance, my character, and even my family. The biting criticisms were unrelenting. I was subjected to angry outbursts over the most trivial irritations, and my masculinity was constantly belittled. My skin color, my hair, both its color and style, my parents, and even my siblings were dragged into the fray of her disdain. Lisa's disregard for basic household responsibilities became increasingly evident. She stopped making any attempt to clean up after herself and flatly refused to share in the cooking duties, a stark contrast to the cooperative spirit we had once maintained before our relationship entered this bitter freeze. I could vividly recall the early days of our relationship, the laughter, the shared dreams, the excitement of new love. Yet, reminiscing about those times now felt like an exercise in futility. The memories of our joyful beginnings seemed to mock the dismal reality of the present. Driven to my breaking point by the relentless abuse and the collapse of our mutual responsibilities, I had finally resolved to take a day off from work. I followed Lisa discreetly after her shift at the local supermarket, where she worked as a cashier. It was during the time following her work that things took a dramatic and unsettling turn. The old Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times," seemed to have taken on a disturbingly literal meaning today, or rather, this evening. The October day, which had started with a comforting warmth, gradually gave way to a similarly warm evening. As I lay here on the ground, the temperature lingering in the upper 60s, I find myself contemplating the unfolding disaster of my life. The warmth of the evening contrasts starkly with the cold reality of my situation, and I am left to grapple with the sobering truth of how far our relationship has deteriorated. Lisa left her job and headed straight for the nearest convenience store. From my vantage point, I saw her carefully retrieve a small overnight case from the trunk of her car, a car that, by the way, was quite impressive, all thanks to me. Her modest earnings from the supermarket were barely enough to cover her expenses, let alone afford such a luxury. I had been more than willing to shoulder all the financial responsibilities, driven by my love for her and my desire to provide her with the best. But that was before our relationship hit this abyss of dysfunction and discontent. As she emerged from the convenience store, I couldn't help but notice her attire, a shockingly provocative outfit. She wore the shortest microskirt I had ever seen. If she hadn't been meticulously groomed and wearing a thong, one might have been able to see every detail of her intimate area with minimal effort. Her blouse was disturbingly sheer, leaving little to the imagination, and she opted not to wear a bra. Each step she took was accentuated by the deliberate sway of her hips as she made her way back to her car. The direction she was headed was unmistakable toward the sleazy bars that dotted the outskirts of town. With a mix of dread and determination, I followed her closely, intent on uncovering the truth behind this unsettling behavior. Lisa drove directly into the sleaziest dive bar in town, a notorious biker hangout with a reputation as seedy as its clientele. I know that not all bikers are bad apples, believe me, I'm one myself. But this bar was far removed from the respectable places where poker runs are organized or concluded on weekends. This establishment had a grimy, unapologetic charm, the kind that draws in those looking for trouble and offers nothing but a rough night out. Lisa maneuvered her car into a parking spot at one end of a long row of motorcycles, all meticulously arranged side by side in a way that shouted biker pride. As she stepped out of the car, her outfit was designed to turn heads. The micro-skirt she wore was so short that it left nothing to the imagination. Had she not been so carefully groomed and sporting a thong, it would have been easy to discern every detail of her most private areas. Her blouse, barely more than a sheer veil, offered no coverage at all, and her decision to forgo a bra made her appearance all the more provocative. The way she walked, with deliberate, exaggerated sways of her hips, ensured that every eye in the vicinity was drawn to her. A couple of bikers were loitering outside near the entrance, casually puffing away on their cigarettes. They looked up as Lisa approached, and their smiles and nods suggested that her presence was not only anticipated but welcomed. It was clear that Lisa was no stranger to this crowd, and her familiarity with the patrons was evident in the way they greeted her. I parked my old truck a good distance away from the line of bikes, taking care to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. While I could afford to drive a newer, more modern vehicle, I had a deep emotional connection to this old Chevy Silverado. This truck had been in my family for decades. My father had bought it brand new back in the 1980s and had kept it in pristine condition until he passed away in an industrial accident. After inheriting it, I had done my utmost to maintain its original state, with only a few personal touches like a lift kit and new 20-inch tires. My dad had replaced the original chrome front bumper with a hefty piece of lumber, giving the truck a rugged, distinctive look. Although the engine was a bit loud, it was a testament to the enduring legacy of my father's meticulous care. As I climbed out of the truck and closed the door, a guy outside who was busy with his cigarette and conversation gave my vehicle a cursory glance. It wasn't an unusual truck in this environment, so his interest quickly waned. He returned to chatting and smoking with his companions, barely registering my presence. The old Silverado, though cherished by me, blended into the background of the bar's rough and tumble scene as I prepared to follow Lisa inside and uncover the reality of her evening's activities. As I approached the entrance of the bar, the pungent aroma of marijuana became increasingly evident, a fitting scent for such a grimy establishment. My attire, consisting of blue jeans and an old t-shirt, was a far cry from my usual business suit. Chasing after a straying wife in a formal outfit seemed utterly inappropriate. While I was out of place compared to the crowd, my casual dress was still more fitting than my typical work attire. I pushed through the door and into the dimly lit interior. No cover charge was required, a detail that further confirmed the bar's dive status. I made my way to the bar and ordered a beer, nothing fancy, just whatever was on tap. As I sipped the cold beverage, I took the opportunity to observe my surroundings through the back bar mirror. Finding Lisa was relatively simple. There were only a few women present, and she stood out like a diamond among pebbles. She was the most attractive woman in the room, a fact accentuated by the rugged biker she had latched onto. Lisa was perched on the lap of the largest, most intimidating figure I had ever seen. Even while seated, he towered over her, easily standing at over 6 feet tall and weighing at least 250 pounds of solid muscle. This wasn't just a beer belly. This man was dedicated to physical fitness. I decided it was best to finish my beer and exit before the situation escalated further. But just as I prepared to leave, Lisa stopped her passionate display with the behemoth and glanced around, ensuring that everyone knew she had captured the attention of the alpha male. Her eyes locked onto the back of my head, and after a moment of confusion, she recognized me. In a split second, her expression turned from sultry to furious. She pointed directly at me and shouted, "That's my husband, Joe. Stop him. Someone. He's going to ruin everything." Panic erupted as a man near the entrance lunged toward me, grabbing my arm with a forceful grip. I twisted around and shoved him hard against the wall, freeing myself from his grasp. Just as I turned back toward the exit, another figure, a burly individual with a menacing stance, aimed a punch at my head. Years of street smarts and rough upbringing gave me an edge in these situations. His punch barely grazed my head as I ducked, and with a swift counter, I landed a solid hit to his solar plexus. He grunted, doubled over, and struggled for breath. Without wasting a moment to see if he was down for good, I made a beeline for the door. Just as I reached it, another large, imposing figure began to make his way inside. I slipped through the door with a sense of urgency, feeling the chaotic energy of the bar behind me as I escaped into the night. The behemoth's voice boomed through the chaotic scene, shouting with a mix of anger and dominance, "Get him! Get him now!" He positioned himself strategically, blocking my path and ensuring I couldn't make an easy escape. I recalled my old football coach's advice about blocking opponents, and with that in mind, I charged forward. Lowering my shoulder, I slammed into the behemoth's chest, hoping to drive him back and clear a path to freedom. Despite my effort, he managed to wrap his enormous arms around me, using his considerable strength to keep me contained. As we stumbled through the bar's exit, he forcefully planted his left foot, hoisting me over his shoulder with a violent throw. My body flew through the air, propelled by the momentum, and crashed onto the dirt-strewn steps outside. I tumbled and rolled, quickly trying to regain my footing. Before I could fully orient myself, the behemoth was already on top of me, his sheer size and formidable presence overwhelming. His powerful blows rained down on me with relentless fury. I tried to shield my face and torso, but his strikes seemed to penetrate every defense. I couldn't even tell if I managed to land a single hit on him amidst the barrage of pain and violence. Each punch, each kick, felt like a searing shock, consuming me in a haze of agony. On the ground, I was utterly at his mercy. He didn't even break a sweat as he dismantled me piece by piece. Throughout the brutal assault, he taunted me mercilessly, his voice dripping with venom. "Take this, loser, you stupid hole. Come into my domain and stir up trouble, will you? I'll show you who's in charge. I'll have her 3 times tonight just to make sure you know your place. I'll make her suffer every night she comes here. And then you'll get my sloppy seconds when she drags herself home to you." His words continued to assault me with each blow, a cruel commentary on my misery. The relentless barrage of fists and kicks was punctuated by his harsh, mocking laughter. I was barely conscious, struggling to move as my strength waned. The last thing I heard before losing full consciousness was Lisa's laughter, a chilling sound that echoed in the dark as I lay crumpled on the ground, defeated and battered. Behemoth barked orders at the few remaining thugs, instructing them to keep a close watch on me and to fetch him the moment I so much as stirred. I want another piece of that pathetic loser before I'm through with him tonight. His words echoed in the dark, damp room, and a shiver of fear ran down my spine. Now that I had regained consciousness, I desperately needed a plan to escape this nightmare without enduring another round of brutal punishment. Or was it just the continuation of the savage beating I'd already received? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I had no desire to find out the hard way. Every inch of my body screamed in agony, and the thought of another beating was almost too much to bear. One of my eyes refused to open, and the sticky sensation suggested it was crusted shut with blood. My right hand, previously pinned beneath my body when I collapsed, moved with agonizing slowness toward my injured eye. It felt like an eternity had passed since I was knocked out, long enough for the blood to dry and form a stubborn crust. I rubbed at it persistently until my eyelid began to part, allowing me a sliver of vision through the pain. The feeling of dried blood cracking and flaking off was nauseating, but I forced myself to keep going. My left eye, thankfully, seemed unscathed, though it throbbed with a dull pain. With no idea where my captors were lurking, I prayed I was concealed in a shadow and began to cautiously inch my way toward freedom. Every movement was a gamble, each second filled with the terror of being discovered and dragged back into the nightmare. The air was thick with the stench of sweat and blood, and my heart pounded so loudly I feared it would give me away. I moved with painstaking care, my senses on high alert for any sound or sign of the thugs who were supposed to be watching me. In a different, equally challenging chapter of my life, during a period of economic downturn, finding a place to live wasn't a challenge. I quickly signed a year-long lease and handled the necessary paperwork to get utilities, electricity, and natural gas in my name. It was a small victory in a sea of chaos, but it felt like a step towards reclaiming some semblance of normalcy. I also contacted the cell phone company, switching to a month-to-month plan and arranging for Lisa's phone to be disconnected in a couple of days. This brief window would give me the chance to inform her that she was on her own. The decision was both liberating and heartbreaking, a necessary step towards severing ties with a past that had become too painful to bear. After that, I headed to the furniture rental store, picking out a couch and a bedroom set. Each piece of furniture represented a fresh start, a new chapter in a life that had been torn apart. I then purchased some basic kitchen supplies: pots, pans, dishes, and utensils. Yes, I was aware Dan's friends had taken all of these when they cleared out our old place, but I didn't care. I intended to return them to Lisa if she asked for them. The act of setting up a new home, however modest, was a cathartic process, each item a symbol of hope and resilience. Next, I called Dan to set a time for the guys to deliver my belongings. The conversation was brief and strained, a reminder of the bridges that had been burned and the friendships that had been tested. Sitting in my new, albeit sparse, apartment, I dialed my soon-to-be ex-wife. The walls were bare, and the rooms echoed with the sounds of a life in transition. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring. "Hello, is that you, Joe?" Her voice was a mixture of confusion and sadness, a reminder of the love that had once been and the pain that had followed. The conversation that ensued was a difficult one, filled with raw emotions and unspoken regrets. As I spoke, I felt a profound sense of loss, but also a glimmer of hope for the future. "Unless someone stole my phone." "Of course it is. Why do you have to be insulting? Where are you, and why haven't you been home? Are you stupid or what?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the past few months pressing heavily on my chest. "I stopped at a bar to have a beer and saw you with your new lover. I didn't even try to confront you, there was no need. After the way you've been treating me, it was clear you had found someone new, and I was just the convenient bill payer. The memory of that night still burned in my mind, and the humiliation and pain seared into my soul. I tried to get up and leave, but you decided I needed to be stopped. Your boyfriend beat me down and stomped me while you stood and laughed. I could still feel the kicks, the crushing weight of his boots on my ribs. I had to crawl away and ended up in a hospital for a couple of days, wondering if my ribs or my kidneys were going to survive your boyfriend's attack. And you ask why I have not been back to the house. Are you seriously deranged? Why would I put myself anywhere near you so your new man can beat me again? Do you want to see me dead? She started to blubber some inanity, but I carried on, fueled by a mixture of rage and heartbreak. That's it, isn't it? You get me killed. Come up with some kind of explanation, maybe that I was jealous of your innocent relationship with the Ahole, and then you get everything, the house, my money, my pension, and my life insurance. Bravo. Too bad I thwarted your plan. I could hear her stammering on the other end, but I wasn't finished. Do you know what it's like to wake up in a hospital bed, battered and broken, and realize the person you loved is responsible for your pain? To lie there, every breath a reminder of betrayal. And to wonder if you'll even survive to see another day. Do you have any idea how much it hurts to know that someone you trusted with your life could be so heartless? I paused, taking a deep breath to steady myself. You stood there and laughed while he beat me, and now you dare to ask why I haven't been home. I can't go back to that house, not after what happened, not after knowing what you're capable of. You wanted to get rid of me, to have me out of your life so you could start fresh with him. But I'm not going to let you win. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Her sobs grew louder, but I had no sympathy left. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I won't be your victim anymore. I'm done being your punching bag, your scapegoat. I'm taking control of my life, and that means leaving you behind. I ended the call, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least it was mine to walk. No more being a pawn in someone else's game. I was free, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. She started to cry. Her voice, usually so strong and commanding, now wavered with desperation and fear. I need you to come home. Everything has gone wrong. The house is up for sale. There is stuff missing. I think someone broke in before I could get home and stole things. I let out a dry laugh, the irony of it all too bitter to ignore. Yeah, someone I know broke in and took my things along with some stuff to help me set up my new place. I will be fully set up tomorrow sometime. Sucks to be you, but I will bet your new man will be supportive and help out. How could you be so cruel to me? That man, the realtor, told me I had to start paying rent. Why do I have to pay rent on our home? This is so wrong. What happened to us? I couldn't help but snort yes, actually snort over the phone. The absurdity of her words made me laugh in disbelief. What happened to us? Are you really that dumb and clueless? Or do you think I am dumb and brain dead? I think you should look in the mirror for your answer. You decided to treat me like crap and start a new relationship with the behemoth before leaving me. You spent my money on skimpy new clothes and went bar hopping with him. Obviously. That night wasn't the first night you were there with him, as everyone seemed to know who you were and who you belonged to. Then you stood and laughed as he beat me half to death. If I had made any real noise when I woke up, he was going to finish the job. I have no doubt. So kiss my butt. You are now a renter, and Mike is the landlord. Do not talk to me about the rent, just pay it, or get out. The silence on the other end was deafening, a void filled with all the unsaid words and unacknowledged truths. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to piece together the shattered remnants of her carefully constructed lies. "You think I'm being cruel," I continued, my voice cold and unwavering. "Cruel is standing by while your lover beats your husband. Cruel is laughing while I lay there, bleeding and broken. Cruel is pretending to love someone while using them for their money. You brought this on yourself. Every lie, every betrayal, every laugh at my expense, you did this." Her sobs grew louder, but I had no sympathy left to give. "You want to know what happened to us? You happened to us. You and your greed, your deceit, your cruelty. I loved you, and you threw it all away for a cheap thrill. So now, you get to live with the consequences. I'm done being your fool. Pay the rent or get out. That's the reality you've created." I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. The chapter with her was finally closed, and though it hurt to walk away, I knew it was the only way to start healing. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like it was my road to walk. I was free from her lies, free from her manipulation, and ready to rebuild my life on my terms. But I need some money. There isn't any left in the checking account. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my voice steady. There won't be any either. I will continue to pay the utilities until the house sells. You pay the rent on your pay. You have a job. Quit buying makeup and clothes for a while. You have enough to get by on, or better yet, get Behemoth to pay your way. Her voice cracked with desperation. "But you are my husband. You were supposed to take care of me." "Yeah, and as my wife, you were supposed to cheer when your lover and his gang beat me up. Guess we both lose." I couldn't help but let the bitterness seep through. "What do I do for a car? My car was totaled, and I need some way to get to work." "Call your boyfriend. You can ride on the back of his bike. He is in the hospital with a head injury and multiple broken bones. He was chasing you when you hit the brakes. He slammed hard and flew a few meters, landing on his head. He has multiple bones fractured. Karma, I guess. Too bad he didn't die. Tell him that I will be looking out for him. If I see him before he sees me, I will avoid him. Otherwise, I will be carrying my gun." The irony was almost too much to bear. I felt a grim satisfaction hearing about his injuries, but it did nothing to ease the pain she had caused. The insults and demands just kept coming, a relentless assault on my already frayed nerves. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Eat crap and die," I spat, and hung up. Her number was still blocked, so I didn't have to worry about her calling back. I tried to sleep honestly. I did, but without a bed, the pain was unbearable. Every part of my body ached, a relentless reminder of the beating I'd taken. Lying on the floor was pure agony, and no matter how I positioned myself, there was no relief. Desperation drove me out of the apartment and to the nearest decent motel. I checked in just for the night, craving the comfort of a real bed. The next morning, it took every ounce of strength I had to get up. My body was a bruised, battered mess, and even the simplest movement sent waves of pain through me. I wondered if prize fighters felt this bad after going 10 rounds with someone just as good or better than they are. The road to healing seemed impossibly long, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. The motel room, with its generic decor and faint smell of disinfectant, was a temporary refuge. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together a plan for the future. The freedom from her was liberating, yet the weight of the past hung heavily on me. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the beatings, the relentless cruelty. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I was determined to rebuild my life from the ground up. I had to find the strength to move on, to create a new path for myself away from the toxic wreckage of my marriage. The journey ahead was daunting, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like it was my journey to take. I had a quick breakfast, trying to shake off the exhaustion from the previous night. After eating, I returned to the apartment, bracing myself for the next phase of setting up my new life. Soon, Dan's guys arrived with my belongings, and in no time, they had everything unloaded and set up. Grateful for their help, I handed each of them an extra $100 bill for their trouble. Shortly after, the rental place delivered the couch and other furniture I had ordered. I tipped them as well, appreciating their prompt service. Realizing I was running low on cash, I made a mental note to visit the bank. I always try to keep a couple of $1,000s in ready cash stashed somewhere easily accessible. After all, I'm not exactly as pure as the driven snow. My accounting practices for my select friends might be considered just a shade illegal, so having emergency funds is a precaution I've learned to take seriously. I have my go bag set up and ready to go at a moment's notice. It's packed with essentials, clothes, money, and important documents. And no, to answer your question, it's not in my former house. Keeping it there would be too risky, especially given the state of things with Lisa and her new thug boyfriend. As I settled into my newly furnished apartment, I felt a strange mix of relief and tension. The pain from the beating still lingered, but the sense of taking control of my life was a small victory. Each piece of furniture, each item unpacked, felt like a step towards reclaiming my independence. The sun filtered through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. Despite the chaos of recent events, I felt a glimmer of hope. The apartment, sparse as it was, represented a fresh start. It was a blank slate, free from the toxicity of my past. As I looked around, I knew I had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. Later, I went to the bank to replenish my walking around money. I felt a sense of reassurance knowing I had cash on hand, just in case. Life had taught me to be prepared for anything, and I wasn't about to let my guard down now. Back at the apartment, I finally allowed myself to relax. The nightmare of the past few months seemed to recede, replaced by a cautious optimism. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. No more looking back, no more being a victim. It was time to rebuild, to find a new path, and to make sure that never again would I be caught off guard. I sat down in my familiar recliner, a small comfort amidst the chaos, to contemplate my near future. The question swirled in my mind like a storm: should I disappear for a while or stick around, work, and act like nothing was going on? When should I pull the trigger and divorce my cheating wife? Should I let her dangle for a while, make her squirm? Should I act like we're getting back together only to dump her later? Nah, that last one was a non-starter. She would just continue with Behemoth or his replacement without a second thought. Maybe making her dangle on until she got smart enough to get a lawyer was the way to go. In our state, the outcome of a divorce wasn't based on the reasons for the dissolution. Unless she went to jail for my beating, no judge would care why we were getting divorced. The ruling would just list out who paid what and when, not why. She would get at least 50% off everything that was publicly known. I would retain the rest. The thought of her getting half of what I had worked so hard for made my blood boil. Okay, so how can I make my wife's life a little nastier? After all, I need and demand some retribution. So far, the gravy train has derailed, and she will have to fend for herself from now on. I hope the house sells quickly. I deliberately priced it to move fast, even in this economy. Her boyfriend is in the hospital. I don't know how badly he is hurt, but I can only hope he will not regain full brain function and has to be fed from a tube for the rest of his miserable life. That goes for any of his friends who happened to be there the other night when he beat me down. They all need to suffer for their sins. I considered my options carefully. Disappearing for a while had its appeal, but it might raise too many questions. Sticking around and acting like everything was normal could buy me some time to plan my next move. As for the divorce, dragging it out might give me a slight edge, but it also prolonged my connection to her. Cutting ties swiftly and decisively seemed more appealing. The thought of her suffering brought a grim satisfaction. She had made my life a living hell. It was only fair she got a taste of her own medicine. I had already cut off her access to the checking account. She was on her own now, struggling to pay rent and keep up with bills. I hoped the house sold quickly, not just for my benefit, but to expedite her descent into the reality she had created. Her boyfriend's injuries were a twisted form of karma. I didn't know the extent of his injuries, but the hope that he wouldn't recover fully was a dark comfort. Knowing that he and his friends might suffer for what they did to me was a small victory in the face of my pain. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I needed to stay focused, to keep my wits about me. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them. I had been through hell and back, and now it was time to reclaim my life, piece by piece. No more being a victim. It was time to take control and make sure those who wronged me paid dearly for their actions. Do I expect to be visited by his friends? Yes, sometime in the future. They will want to right the wrongs they perceive to have been visited upon them. The thought of it made my stomach churn, but I knew I had to be prepared. I went over to where my gun safe had been placed by the movers and retrieved my judge. This bad boy only carries 5 rounds in its cylinder but can shoot either .45 caliber, that's the .45 long Colt, not the .455 ACP or .410 shot shells. I loaded it with .410 rounds filled with slugs. These rounds could blast through a concrete block wall. I vowed to carry it with me wherever I went, whether inside the apartment or outside of it. In the accompanying leg bag, I carried extra shells, both of the .45 and .410 variety. The weight of the weapon was a grim comfort, a reminder of the harsh reality I was living in. I sat and wept a little, the enormity of everything crashing down on me. I firmly believed that the best offense was a solid offense. I was ready to defend myself, to ensure that no one would ever hurt me like that again. So now what? Who should pay next for my wife's infidelity? The anger simmered just below the surface, but I decided to let it ride for a bit and see what was coming next. The uncertainty was maddening, but I knew I had to keep a level head. There were too many variables and too many ways this could all go wrong if I acted rashly. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think clearly. The first step was ensuring my safety. Carrying the judge gave me a sense of control, but I also needed to be vigilant. I would avoid any places where I might run into her friends, and I would be cautious about who I trusted. The betrayal I had experienced had shattered my faith in people, and rebuilding that trust would take time. In the meantime, I needed to focus on practical matters. Getting the apartment fully set up was a priority. Creating a safe and comfortable space for myself was essential. As I moved around organizing my new home, I felt a small sense of accomplishment. Each task completed was a step towards reclaiming my life. I also needed to keep a close eye on the house sale. The sooner it sold, the sooner I could cut ties with my past. The money from the sale would give me a cushion, a way to start fresh without the constant worry of financial instability. I would monitor the market closely and make sure everything was for a quick sale. As for my wife, I decided to bide my time. Letting her twist in the wind for a while seemed fitting. She needed to experience the consequences of her actions, to understand that she couldn't treat people the way she had and get away with it. I would keep an eye on her and make sure she didn't try anything stupid, but I wouldn't make any moves just yet. For now, I would focus on myself. Healing, both physically and emotionally, was my top priority. I would build a new life, one step at a time, and make sure that no one ever had the power to hurt me again. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to walk it with my head held high. The next few days passed without incident. I returned to work, keeping the judge tucked securely in my waistband, ready for anything. The sense of normalcy was almost comforting, though the ever-present threat loomed in the back of my mind. Then my phone started buzzing again, this time from an unknown number. It was Lisa. She had managed to get a new number after I had shut hers off. Strangely, she seemed to believe that we had just had a minor spat and that I was overreacting. When I asked her how Behemoth was doing, she feigned ignorance, acting like she had no idea who I was talking about. I suppose I still didn't know the real name of my attacker, and she certainly couldn't relate to the name Behemoth. Finally, I decided to cut through the pretense. I asked her about her sex life and if she knew how to make money quickly. That's when the tears started. She was on the verge of begging, claiming she was no longer a stripper. Sure, maybe not now, but it was only a matter of time before she found herself back in that world, permit or no permit. I asked if she was working. She said she planned to go to school and get a degree in massage therapy, boasting that she could make up to $50 an hour doing that. I had a different idea. I suggested she get with her old man and hit him up for some cash, or I could come by and pick her up myself. I told her I had a nice room set up for her, located in a place where she could provide massage therapy and a few other things. Predictably, she chose to have her old man pay her way out of her mess. I was willing to wait. I had no intention of providing her with any kind of reward. She had already been on her way out of my life, and her new boyfriend was on the verge of meeting his maker. The next day, I did my final check on the house and instructed my real estate agent to prepare it for sale. It was time to move on, to cut the last remaining ties to my past. Sitting back, I waited for the property to sell. The house, once a symbol of our life together, now felt like a burden I was eager to shed. I hoped it would sell quickly, bringing an end to this chapter of my life. The anticipation of finality was both exhilarating and daunting. I knew that letting go of the past was necessary, but it was still a painful process. As I waited, I found myself reflecting on the twists and turns that had brought me here. The betrayal, the violence, the struggle to rebuild it had all shaped me in ways I was only beginning to understand. Despite the pain, there was a newfound strength within me. I was no longer the person who had been blindsided by a cheating spouse and a brutal attack. I was someone who had faced down his demons and was ready to take control of his future. The days passed slowly, each one bringing me closer to the sale of the house and the final severing of ties. I stayed vigilant, always aware of the potential threats around me, but I also allowed myself moments of hope. There was a future out there, one that I was determined to seize with both hands. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. In those quiet moments, I realized that I was ready for whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but I had the resilience and the resolve to face it head-on. The past might have been painful, but it had also forged a new strength within me. And that, more than anything, was what I needed to move forward. I wanted to relax, but I couldn't shake the unease. Starting my new life brought a whirlwind of thoughts about what lay ahead. Had I truly done everything right? Had I made every effort to eliminate the problems that plagued me? These questions gnawed at me. I considered going back to college, taking up a few classes, and getting another degree. A career in computing had always been my dream, but those days felt like a distant memory. Still, I had managed to keep myself employed in business, securing my livelihood. My old life was undeniably over. My wife was out of it, her betrayal a wound that would eventually scar over. My attackers were hurt, and retribution served in a twisted form of justice. The house, once a symbol of shared dreams, was now on the market, awaiting a new owner. I felt a strange sense of peace about my future, though the road to healing was just beginning. I reflected on the fact that my life had taken such a dramatic turn. The upheaval had left me scarred, both physically and emotionally, but I was determined to emerge stronger. The time had come to focus on my recovery, to figure out how to find joy in this new chapter. Had my attackers survived? Perhaps, but I knew that if the worst came to pass, I would plead self-defense. Deep down, I doubted anyone would care if I put a couple of those dirtbags down for good. Maybe I'd even receive a humanitarian award for removing them and their ilk from the gene pool. Despite the grim humor, the reality was that I needed to be vigilant. My judge, ever present, was a constant reminder of the threats that still lingered. Carrying it gave me a sense of control, but also underscored the fragility of my situation. The days ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face them head-on. In the meantime, I kept busy. I organized my new apartment, transforming it into a space that felt safe and comfortable. The familiarity of my old recliner provided a small comfort, a reminder that some things, no matter how small, could remain constant. I also made sure to keep a stash of ready cash on hand, always prepared for the unexpected. The thought of revisiting my academic aspirations lingered. A degree in computing could open new doors, offering a fresh start in a field I had once been passionate about. The idea of returning to school, of immersing myself in something constructive, was appealing. It would be a way to rebuild, to channel my energy into something positive. Ultimately, my focus was on moving forward. I would take each day as it came, gradually piecing together the fragments of my life. The path to healing was long, but I was determined to walk it with resilience and hope. My past had shaped me, but it wouldn't define me. There was a future waiting, one that I was ready to seize with both hands. As I looked out at the world, I felt a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The unknown was daunting, but it also held the promise of new beginnings. I had survived the worst, and now it was time to thrive. The road ahead was mine to navigate, and I was ready to embark on this journey with a renewed sense of purpose. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, determined to turn up the heat. I surveyed the street around us, noting the eerie calm. "Look around," I said, my voice low and menacing. "Do you see anyone paying attention to what's happening here? The good folks in this neighborhood have probably heard your beast of a bike and decided it's not worth their involvement. Listen, do you hear any sirens? Either the cops are oblivious to our little standoff or they're indifferent." He glanced around nervously. Despite the mild weather and the fact that it was early evening, the street was empty. No one was around to witness our confrontation. I clicked the cylinder of my Judge revolver twice, the sound echoing in the still air. His face grew even more pale, a mixture of fear and realization setting in. Standing just a few feet away, I raised the Judge and fired a .410 shell filled with birdshot, aiming at his headlight. The shot shattered the headlight's glass, sending fragments scattering. The birdshot didn't penetrate the assembly, but it was close enough to cause a mess. From the look on his face, I could tell the impact was startling. I suspected he might have soiled himself in fright. "Now, get that piece of junk turned around and head home," I ordered. "It's getting dark fast, and without a headlight, you're a sitting duck. I might just follow you, and I wouldn't want to see you in a collision in the dark." He nodded quickly, making a series of multi-point turns to get his bike headed in the opposite direction. With a speed born of urgency and fear, he sped off, disappearing around the corner. I watched until he was out of sight before heading back to my truck. Driving cautiously toward downtown, I kept a sharp eye on the road, wary of any potential follow-up from his friends. If he had called them, they might be looking for me. I reached my apartment building, parking the truck behind it as was my custom to avoid any unwanted attention. Inside, I replaced the spent cartridge with a fresh .410 shell loaded with slugs. No more playing nice. The gravity of the situation was sinking in, and I was ready to take things up a notch if necessary. The message was clear: I wasn't to be trifled with. As darkness fell, I settled in, mentally preparing for whatever might come next. My new reality was one of vigilance and resolve. The calm before the storm could be deceiving, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with a steely determination. The rest of the evening and night passed without incident. I wished I could say the same for the days ahead, but the uneasy truce didn't last. About a month after Stevie's discharge from the hospital, the peace shattered. It began like any other evening, me driving a cautious route back to my apartment, checking my mirrors frequently. Tonight I felt a slight relief as I didn't spot anyone tailing me. I parked behind the building, settled into my routine of reheating a frozen meal, and turned on the TV to watch some evening football. The season was winding down, with fewer night games scheduled during the week. As the game wrapped up, I was mentally preparing for the comfort of my bed when the tranquility was abruptly shattered. A thunderous banging on my apartment door jolted me upright. The muffled shouts that accompanied the commotion made it clear Stevie had tracked me down. With my heart racing, I grabbed my phone and activated the video recorder, capturing the chaos outside. I dialed 911, thankful for the multitasking capabilities of modern phones. As the dispatcher answered, I explained that I was in fear for my life. The dispatcher could hear the yelling through the line and reassured me that help was on the way. The weight of the situation settled heavily on me. The familiar feeling of vulnerability returned, but this time I was prepared. The video footage would serve as evidence, and the arrival of law enforcement promised to restore a semblance of security. As I waited, I focused on remaining calm, knowing that the immediate danger would soon be addressed. I briefly considered opening the door and letting Behemoth inside, but the thought quickly crossed my mind that it might appear as an invitation to the police. So, I resolved to wait for him to force his way in. I stood, gripping the judge with a firm hand, its hammer cocked and ready for action. The door, already weakened by his assault, finally gave way with a resounding crash, one hinge tearing free from the frame. Steve, or Grizzly as I'd come to know him, stormed in with a menacing grin plastered across his face. His swagger spoke of confidence and a grim determination to exact revenge. His hands were raised, poised to unleash another brutal attack, but his eyes failed to notice the gun I held. At that moment, I didn't hesitate. I fired 2 shots directly into his chest. The impact was immediate. His expression shifted from a confident sneer to a look of bewilderment as his hands dropped to his chest, struggling to comprehend the sudden pain. Despite the severe wounds, his forward momentum carried him toward me. I sidestepped his advancing body, keeping my focus on the door. Through the shattered opening, I saw a couple of his biker cronies entering, presumably to finish the job. I wasn't about to give them the chance. I aimed and fired single shots at each of them, their bodies collapsing with a heavy thud. The slugs did their job with impressive effectiveness, demonstrating their formidable stopping power. The danger was neutralized, at least for now. The room fell eerily silent after the chaos. I remained on high alert, waiting for any further threats while processing the gravity of what had just transpired. The judge in my hand felt like a heavy weight of responsibility, but it had proven its worth in defending my life. I briefly considered opening the door and letting Behemoth inside, but the thought quickly crossed my mind that it might appear as an invitation to the police. So I resolved to wait for him to force his way in. I stood, gripping the judge with a firm hand, its hammer cocked and ready for action. The door, already weakened by his assault, finally gave way with a resounding crash, one hinge tearing free from the frame. Steve, or Grizzly as I'd come to know him, stormed in with a menacing grin plastered across his face. His swagger spoke of confidence and a grim determination to exact revenge. His hands were raised, poised to unleash another brutal attack, but his eyes failed to notice the gun I held. At that moment, I didn't hesitate. I fired 2 shots directly into his chest. The impact was immediate. His expression shifted from a confident sneer to a look of bewilderment as his hands dropped to his chest, struggling to comprehend the sudden pain. Despite the severe wounds, his forward momentum carried him toward me. I sidestepped his advancing body, keeping my focus on the door. Through the shattered opening, I saw a couple of his biker cronies entering, presumably to finish the job. I wasn't about to give them the chance. I aimed and fired single shots at each of them, their bodies collapsing with a heavy thud. The slugs did their job with impressive effectiveness, demonstrating their formidable stopping power. The danger was neutralized, at least for now. The room fell eerily silent after the chaos. I remained on high alert, waiting for any further threats while processing the gravity of what had just transpired. The judge in my hand felt like a heavy weight of responsibility, but it had proven its worth in defending my life. I locked eyes with him, the weight of my words heavy in the air. If I'd seen you coming first, I'd have avoided you. But since you've come for me, I'll put you down like a rabid dog. His expression remained vacant, as if the gravity of his situation hadn't fully sunk in. It was clear he hadn't learned from his past encounters, and I hoped his remaining friends would heed the lesson before my circle took action. I turned off the recorder just before speaking, ensuring that our final exchange wouldn't become part of the evidence. Leaning in close, I made sure my words reached his ears. I have friends who won't make a public show of their discontent. They won't leave behind any clues. Your friends will vanish without a trace. Their bikes will be dismantled and sold off piece by piece. Their families will be left with questions, but no answers. All that will remain is the dark void where they used to be, with no hope of discovery. The grim reality of the situation settled over us. His two accomplices, now incapacitated, wouldn't be able to recount my message. Just then, Steve let out a final, ragged breath. Whether he fully grasped my warning or not, I was ready to repeat it if necessary. The air was thick with the certainty of finality, and I remained vigilant, prepared for any further complications. When the police arrived, I made sure to show them I was not a threat. I dropped to my knees, carefully placing the judge on the floor with its chamber open and the spent shells spread out in front of me. I kept my hands behind my head, though my eyes remained fixed on the two incapacitated figures on the floor, just in case they decided to muster any sudden bravery. The first officer cautiously approached, his weapon trained on me and the others. He secured me in handcuffs while keeping a vigilant eye on the scene. Once I was restrained, the other officers proceeded to cuff the two remaining individuals, even though they posed no immediate threat. I understood the procedure they had to ensure everyone was controlled until the situation was fully assessed and clarified. In moments like these, everyone is a suspect until all the details are sorted out. One of the officers conducted a rapid search and discovered that both bikers were armed with knives and pistols. Even Behemoth was found carrying a pistol and brass knuckles. The scene was chaotic but controlled. The paramedics arrived swiftly, their efficiency paramount as they attended to the two injured men, who were starting to show signs of severe distress. The urgency of their condition meant they were swiftly loaded into the ambulances and transported to Centerville Trauma Center. As the ambulances departed, two more officers accompanied them to the hospital. I reflected on how my recent actions had unintentionally generated so much business for the trauma center. It seemed that the events of the past few months had created a significant ripple effect, leading to frequent visits and a steady stream of activity at the medical facility. The officers conducted a thorough interview on the scene after reading my rights. I requested that they contact an attorney I was familiar with, and once that was arranged, I provided my statement in full detail, leaving nothing out. I made sure to be completely transparent, presenting all relevant information about the incident. The police took possession of my phone, and one officer contacted the dispatcher to ensure that the timestamp for the 911 call was properly recorded for later review. On my phone, they found a collection of selfies documenting the injuries I had sustained from Behemoth's assault, along with a series of messages and phone calls from my wife. I knew that the district attorney would likely find these materials to be quite revealing and significant for the case. At the station, I was booked on multiple charges: manslaughter, use of a firearm within city limits, and aggravated assault. The detective who re-interviewed me warned that additional charges might be added as the investigation progressed. Thankfully, my new attorney arrived soon after, and the questioning stopped for the time being. The following morning, I was released on my recognizance. The media had caught wind of the story, portraying me as a man wronged by dangerous individuals who had finally taken a stand. The coverage painted me as a victim of a relentless campaign of harassment who had been pushed to defend himself. This narrative swayed the district attorney, who received numerous calls demanding my release. It seemed he was persuaded, as he agreed to let me go. Despite my release, I was informed that the charges against me were still pending and that all my firearms had been confiscated as evidence. I wasn't too concerned about my immediate situation. I had a network of friends ready to rearm me if necessary, so I felt relatively secure knowing that, while the legal battle was far from over, I had support and options available. The DA informed me that Lisa was spinning a different narrative from what I had reported. According to her version, Steve had allegedly come to me to offer a truce and propose that I become his accountant, suggesting that he wanted to put the past behind us. I couldn't help but laugh at this absurd fairy tale. It was a far cry from the reality of the situation. The DA reassured me that the recordings I had provided painted a much clearer and more accurate picture of the events. He expressed hope that the violence would subside now that the truth was coming to light. I simply nodded in acknowledgement as I left the police station, feeling a mix of skepticism and relief. The battle was far from over, but at least the legal system was beginning to see through the fiction Lisa was trying to sell. Wow, what a roller coaster of a story we've journeyed through. From the intense confrontations to the unexpected twists, it's been quite the ride. Now, let's reflect on the key takeaways from this gripping narrative. What have you learned so far? How can these insights impact your own life or perspective? I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below about one valuable lesson you've taken away and how you plan to apply it in your own life. If you enjoyed this video and want to stay updated on our latest content, make sure to leave your comment, hit that like button, share this video with friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to create engaging and impactful content. Thanks for watching.